crash for today. So the remaining portion, 2-3 aspects I want to share with you. So be with me to the entire during the entire course of this final episode, we can say. So now, yesterday we have seen lean, what is lean and negative lean. Now we will talk about pledge. What is pledge? Pledge is a type of charge which is defined in Indian Contract Act 1972. Actually, pledge represents movable security. Pledge is suitable for movable type of security. Movable. So now for movable, we can make it in two directions. One is pledge and another one is hypothecation. So there is basically some difference between these two. Otherwise, both are equal. What is a pledge? A pledge is a bailment of goods as a security for repayment of a debt. So it is actually a bailment basically, which is being effected by the debtor to the creditor in favor of the creditor as a promise to repay the debt. If the debt is discharged, the pledged goods has to be released. So the person making the pledge is known as the pledger or pawner, and the person who is receiving the pledge is known as pledgee or pawnee. If there is a default, the pawnee can sell the goods after giving reasonable notice. These are all the rights of the pawnee. Here, the possession is with the banker and the ownership is with the customer. This is the basic difference between the pledge and hypothecation. In pledge, the possession is with the creditor, but in hypothecation, the possession is with the borrower, that is the debtor. This is the basic difference. Otherwise, there is no difference at all. But pledge is defined in Indian Contract Act, whereas hypothecation is defined in SARFAESI Act, Section 2, subsection N. So suppose you take the example of an auto rickshaw finance. Bank has financed one customer to acquire an auto rickshaw. So auto rickshaw, which is the suitable type of charge?
Hypothecation.
Here we have to ask one question, whether the possession has to be handed over to the borrower or it has to be retained by the banker. If it is retained by the banker, the auto rickshaw wala cannot generate income out of running that, performing or doing that auto rickshaw on hire. But if the possession is with the borrower, he can use that asset and he can create income for himself and he can repay the amount. Is it not? That is the basic idea. So if you take the gold ornaments in the case of a gold loan, the ornaments are pledged to the bank, because there, if you are allowing the customer to keep the ornaments with himself, there is a risk involved in it. And moreover, the borrower is not going to generate any additional income by keeping the ornaments with himself. This is the basic idea between these two. So in pledge, the possession is with the creditor, that is the banker. In hypothecation, the possession is with the borrower. So this is hypothecation. Also relates to movable assets, possession as well as the ownership with the borrower. And borrower agrees to give possession when it is requested by the creditor. That is the undertaking. It's a letter of continuing security. So the security will be continued, but there is a condition that the possession will be handed over by the debtor to the creditor upon request. Normally this will not happen. That is why we are moving against that particular security under SARFAESI. So here, the hypothecation charge has to be registered with the CERSAI. We have seen in the SARFAESI Act. That has to be registered with the CERSAI, that is the Central Registry for Securitized Assets and Enforcement of Security Interest. So those kind of things have to be registered with CERSAI. Then comes mortgage. The mortgage is in respect of immovable property. It is suitable for immovable property. So far we have seen movable property. One is pledge, another one is hypothecation, but here it is immovable property. The property is not of movable nature. So there are different types of mortgages. The mortgage is defined as per section 58 subsection A of Transfer of Property Act 1882. Section 58 subsection A. So mortgage is actually the transfer of the security interest by the debtor to the creditor. So it is a transfer of the security interest in the property by the debtor to the creditor by way of a mortgage deed. So the underlying document will be mortgage deed. So deed will be there in simple mortgage, deed will be there in mortgage by conditional sale, deed will be there in usufructuary mortgage, deed will be there in English mortgage, and deed will not be there. There may not be any deed in mortgage by deposit of title deeds, which is commonly known as equitable mortgage preferred by a banker. Anonymous mortgage also contain a transaction with the support of a deed. So one by one we will look into what is exactly simple mortgage. Simple mortgage is a mortgage wherein the debtor is conveying the title of the property, the interest, that is the interest in the property to the creditor by way of a mortgage deed. Here he is giving the interest in the property as well as he is creating a personal liability. He is personally also liable to the creditor. That means the creditor can go for enforcing this property in a court of law simultaneously if the mortgage that realized value is not sufficient to liquidate the liability. The creditor can go against the debtor personally also. That means he can personally sue the debtor. So personal liability is present only in simple mortgage and in equitable mortgage. Personal liability is present. In other types of mortgages, there is no personal liability, only the liability to the extent of the security value of the mortgage will be covered. So this is simple mortgage by way of a mortgage deed. Registration is required if the amount secured is 100 rupees or more as per Indian Registration Act. So this is a mortgage which attracts what is that, registration and stamp duty, because since there is a requirement of registration, it attracts stamp duty also. The second one is mortgage by conditional sale. It is a peculiar type of deed executed by the debtor in favor of the creditor, and the debtor will say that I am handing over the security, this immovable property, in favor of you today. If at all I am not remitting the entire dues within a particular time, this deed can be treated as a conveyance deed of title, a conditional sale. That is, at the time of creating the deed, it cannot be treated as a sale. But if there is a default from the part of the debtor to pay the amount, at that particular point, that is the triggering point where that deed will become a sale. Before that, it is only a conditional sale. That means ostensible sale. We will call it as ostensible sale. Here normally, not necessary always, normally the possession will be conveyed to the mortgagee. The mortgager will give the possession also. Not always it is true. The third one is usufructuary mortgage. Usufructuary mortgage is a type of mortgage where the mortgager is giving possession right to the mortgagee and allow him to enjoy the fruits out of that mortgage, whatever is the extra income he is earning or whatever is the income from that particular mortgage. Suppose it may be rent, suppose it may be sale proceeds from coconuts from the coconut tree which is located or available in the particular immobile property. So the mortgagee can realize those type of things, those type of income. So here also possession is being given invariably to the mortgagee and there is no personal liability. Upon remitting the entire amount, the mortgagee, there is a condition that the mortgagee has to give the possession back to the mortgager. This is known as usufructuary mortgage. Normally in examination, a type of mortgage in which the mortgagee is getting the right to earn income out of the immobile property, that is only mortgage, it is usufructuary. Because sometimes 4 shop rooms will be there in that landed property. Shop room may have been rented out. So that rental income can be taken by the mortgagee. That is only available in the case of usufructuary. And other mortgages, the entire income out of that immobile property should go to the mortgager. That next one is English mortgage, where normally no possession will be conveyed. Even there are cases where possession also being conveyed. So we cannot say that no possession is being conveyed always. But it is a peculiar type of mortgage which was very much used by the British period, people in British period. That is in 1882, this act is enacted. So based on that, this was a popular type of mortgage at that time. Here, the mortgager is conveying the title to the mortgage. He is conveying the title. He is giving the entire right of the property through a legal document known as the mortgage deed. And now the mortgagee is having the title over the property. But there is a condition in the same deed. If the mortgager remits the entire amount back within the stipulated time, it is the obligation of the mortgagee to transfer or reconvey the title of the property back to the debtor, the mortgager. So the mortgagee, it is obligatory on the part of the mortgagee to reconvey this property upon full amount payment of the mortgage deed amount. So here the conveying of title is taking place. In no other mortgages it is taking place. The title itself is being conveyed to the other party with a condition that upon remittance of the entire mortgage money, which is due for payment on a particular date, if at all the mortgager has paid the entire amount, the mortgaged property should be reconveyed to the mortgager. This is the condition in the case of English mortgage. And the popular mortgage which the banks are now adopting is the equitable mortgage, where there is no need of a deed. A separate sale deed is, mortgage deed is not there. So here, one peculiarity is that this mortgage has to be created by way of exchange of or handing over of the title deed of the document pertaining to the immobile property by the debtor to the creditor. That should be in a notified center. If it is not carried out in a notified center, it will not be treated as a equitable mortgage. So it has to be taken place in a notified center. Which center can be treated as a notified center? Those centers which are notified by the state government concerned. Very important. State government is notifying the notified centers. Where it is notifying? In the official gazette of the state government, it is notifying those centers where if a debtor is handing over the title deed of the document to the creditor without creating any mortgage deed, simply he is handing over the title deed, but at the time of handing over the title deed, in his mind, that is the intention of the borrower or the debtor or the mortgager, is that he is handing over the security as a security, handing over the document as a security for an advance, which is already given by the granted by the creditor, or which is yet to be granted, like that. It may be past, present, or future. There is no problem on that. So this is known as equitable mortgage. And any mortgage which is not confined to any one of these above mentioned mortgages, but maybe sometimes a combination or some of the features of the above mortgages are inscribed. If that is the case, because India, there are so many in vicinity, from place to place, there are different type of culture is there. So there are different types of this mortgage being taken place. Still it is taking place. So if that is the case, if any mortgage which we cannot be identified as simple or mortgage by conditional sale or usufructuary or English or mortgage by deposit of title deeds, those cases we can treat that mortgage deed as anomalous mortgage. So these are all regarding mortgages. Then assignment. Assignment is an actionable claim. Put it in chat box, please. Put it in chat box. Assignment is an actionable claim. Actionable claim means what? A claim of the debtor. That is, there is a creditor and there is a debtor. The debtor is now approaching the creditor for a finance, for security for an advance. In order to give some security, the debtor is now telling that I will give you an assignment What type of assignment? Because I have a claim with Mr. E, maybe sometimes LIC, Life Insurance Corporation, LIC, you take it as LIC. So the D has invested some funds by way of premium with LIC. So now LIC is having a commitment towards D, that either if D survives, then LIC will make the payment on maturity, or if something happened to D's life, again LIC will compensate the legal heirs of D with the amount, sum assured. So this is actually treated as a claim which is eligible to Mr. D from LIC. Now D is in need of funds. What D will do? D will approach his banker and he will say that I have a claim over LIC. That claim I will assign to you. That claim I will assign to you. That is, I am having a right to claim that. That right I am assigning to you, so that you now give me some money by way of loan. And if at all I am defaulting, you can enforce this right and you can collect the money from LIC. This is actually known as assignment. So assignment is basically, it is not a mere right in the security or property. It is a right to claim over a particular receivables. That is, some amount has to be received from some other person. That right will be the right to receive that amount. That is known as claim. That will be assigned in favor of the creditor. So this is assignment. Now I will move to chat box. Usufructuary mortgage. Usufructuary mortgage is a separate type of mortgage where the mortgager is handing over the possession of the mortgage property to the creditor, that is a mortgagee, and the mortgagee will be allowed to use it, and he will be allowed to take all income out of the property. That is known as usufructuary mortgage. Personal liability means, personal liability, Shiva Satyanarayana is asking, what is personal liability? Suppose the mortgage is worth of 1 lakh, but when the credit become due, the creditor has to file a suit in a court of law. At the time of filing the suit, the total amount receivable from the mortgager is 1,05,000. Just you imagine. At the time of selling the property, he could realize only 95,000. So there is a difference of 10,000. Already the mortgaged property has been realized. Again, something is left. That is 10,000 rupees yet to be collected. For that 10,000, he can move in a court of law to sue the customer. That is known as personal liability. Wherever the personal liability is not there, the creditor has to satisfy with the realized property of the mortgage. Last mortgage is anomalous mortgage. Kalidas is asking. It is anomalous means which is not a simple mortgage, which is not a conditional mortgage, which is not a unified usufructuary, which is not English. So you cannot categorize it as any one of the 5 items listed earlier, so that it will be sometimes it may be a combination of 2, sometimes a different one. So it is known as anomalous mortgage. What is registered mortgage and non-registered mortgage? Except equitable mortgage, all the mortgages have to be registered with the Register of Assurance. The mortgage deed has to be registered as per Registration Act, Indian Registration Act. So that is known as registration. That is, a document has to be registered with the Register of Assurance. What is book debts? Book debts is nothing but receivables from the trader. Suppose the goods are sold on credit, some amount will be receivable from the customer. No, it may be sundry debtors or bills receivable. Both of them are known as receivables.
Sir, in equitable mortgage, there is no registration, sir. In equitable mortgage,
there is no deed. If at all there is no deed, if at all there is a deed, it has to be registered. There is no deed in equitable mortgage. That is why there is no registration required. Only merely handing out the document is enough. For that, we will take a white paper confirmation. That's all.
But some banks we go to SRTO for registrations in equitable mortgage also.
Yeah. Sometimes the banks, in some states, they are even registering it for safety. That is not required. It is not compulsory. But if the state is permitting that, you can do that.
Okay, sir. Okay. Okay, sir.
Yes. Now we will move to the most important topic: insolvency and bankruptcy code. This is one of the avenue available for resolving NPAs. So insolvency and bankruptcy code has been introduced in India, and with the introduction of this, our CDR has gone. There is no CDR now. Corporate debt restructuring. and SDR has gone now, that is strategic debt restructuring, and S4A also has gone. These are all different avenues which were available earlier to introduction of this IBC 2016. After introduction of 2016, IBC 2016, all this mechanism has been withdrawn by Reserve Bank of India. Now only one mechanism is available, that is IBC. It deals with insolvency. What is insolvency? When an individual or an organization unable to meet its outstanding financial debt towards its lender as and when due, then he may be, or that institution may be treated as insolvent. It is unable to settle the dues because there is no cash generation. Maybe purposeful or not. That is not the relevant fact here. But ultimately, if a court is confirming that it is not purposeful, actually there is a problem with the customer, and the court is finalizing that he is insolvent. If the court declares him an insolvent, then we can say that it is bankruptcy. So insolvency and bankruptcy are one and the same. In the first case, the court has not confirmed, but in the second case, court is confirming that the particular debtor or the borrower is an insolvent in the eyes of law. He is not capable of entering into any contract thereafter. So that nobody is going to deal with this customer directly because he is not capable of entering into any valid contract. Even a bank cannot open account. So if at all a bank has already opened account, that amount will be now in the hands of the liquidator, official receiver, who will be appointed by the court for settling his dues. So this is the scenario. Now, what way it will be beneficial to resolve our NPA? IBC these provisions can be applied to a company which is registered under Indian Companies Act. So it is a registered body. It can be applied to a limited liability partnership. Again, LLP is a registered body. It can be applied to a partnership firm. Partnership firm is as per 1932 Act partnership. That is group of persons joining together to do some common business in order to earn profit, but they are not a registered organization, registered entity, even an individual. So all these type of customers are now covered by IBC 2016. But this is not applicable to banks, financial institutions, and insurance company. That means if a bank is a borrower, you cannot invoke IBC on that bank. If a financial institution is a borrower, he is borrowing money, the creditor cannot enforce IBC on a financial institution like that insurance company. Whenever the borrower is a company, whenever the borrower is a limited liability partnership, whenever it is a partnership firm as per 1932 Act, or whenever it is an individual as per Indian Contract Act, then only this IBC can be invoked. So this is the provision regarding that. There are 4 pillars in IBC. Number 1 is insolvency professionals. They are actually chartered accountants having minimum 10 years experience and who is registering themselves with Insolvency and the Bankruptcy Board of India, IBBI, Insolvency and Bankruptcy Board of India, which is a regulator to monitor this process, IBC 2016. So chartered accountants are basically having sufficient knowledge regarding lending of money and the related aspects, even mortgages, charges, what are all the things you have learned now, they will learn in detail. So they are in a position to say whether this unit can be survived, whether we can make the unit survive after giving an extra dose of money or some replacement, whether it will survive or not. They can say that because they are experts on that. Anusha, take care of your audio. So chartered accountants having minimum 10 years experience and who has cleared the examination to this effect conducted by IBBI can be treated as insolvency professionals under IBC 2016. And the next party is information utility. There are entities which are collecting and collate and disseminate financial information regarding the lender and the borrower and the terms and conditions. Everything will be, what are all the informations available in the market in different sites. They will collect it and they will store it. And whenever it is required, they will inform, they will release this information to the insolvency professionals. So this information will be used by the insolvency professionals to take a decision on whether the company, that particular borrower's account can be refaced or restructured, or whether we have to go for any winding up operation. So there are only two questions, whether the unit will survive or not. If it is not surviving, we have to go for winding up. Only two, yes or no, only two questions are there. If yes, okay, we can finance something more, we can do some restructuring, we can extend the repayment period, we can give additional extra dose of loans and fund-based limits, non-fund-based limits, so that the unit will survive. And the unit will thereafter, after some time, it will generate profit. So it will come back into the position, old position, is it not? If that is not happening, then immediately it has to be, wind up processing has to be started. Here, the adjudicating authority is NCLT and DRT. If it is a company, NCLT is the adjudicating authority because company is a registered entity. If it is LLP, again NCLT will be the authority. LLP also, NCLT will be the adjudicating authority. So why? Because both these organizations, entities are registered organizations as per some law, that is as per 2013 Companies Act, and LLP as per 2008 LLP Act. But DRT is applicable for partnership and individuals. For partnership and individuals, DRT is applicable, partnership and individuals, because they are not registered bodies. Even registration is not compulsory in the case of a partnership. So their accounts, the regulator will be the adjudicator, sorry, not the regulator, the adjudicating authority will be DRT. So now the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Board of India, the regulator, who is having the power to regulate the insolvency professionals. So they are actually the man, the force behind this. Whether the unit can be rehabilitated or not, they are the design. They will submit the project report to the creditors. Normally the bankers will be the creditors. That means financial creditors. We can say that financial creditors. And IIB is overseeing the time-bound insolvency resolution process. There is a time-bound process being declared by Government of India under this Act. It has to be finished within that period. Coverage is either to go for resolution, either to go for a resolution. That means you can make the unit viable by giving extra dose of funds. You can restructure the account, or it has to be liquidated. Winding up and distribution of assets had to happen. Either this or this. That is why I told yes or no. That should be the criteria. Appeals can be preferred if the customer, that is the company or LLP, is going to prefer an appeal. If it is a partnership firm or individual, it can prefer appeal with the DRAT. And if the verdict of DRAT is not satisfactory for those borrowers, they can even prefer appeal to Supreme Court. Like that, company and LLP can prefer appeal with NCLT, because NCLT is the adjudicating authority. They are giving some verdict now. So company wants to go for an appeal, it can prefer an appeal to NCLAT. That is National Company Law Appellate Tribunal. This is National Company Law Tribunal. DRT is Debt Recovery Tribunal. DRAT is Debt Recovery Appellate Tribunal. So here NCALT, that is National Company Law Appellate Tribunal, if the verdict of NCLAT is also not satisfactory to the company or the LLP, they can move to Supreme Court. The time allowed is 45 days. First stage 30, normally 30 days. It can take another 15 days. Second stage 45 days. So you can remember it like this: 30 plus 15, 45. Here minimum and maximum is 45. Yes. So this is with regard, only some few questions will be asked from the examination point of view only. This is a very large subject, very big subject. We can talk with IBC 2016 for 3 to 4 hours. But for examination point of view, now you have to learn only from examination point of view. Only that is enough for you now. Rupa is asking one day-to-day example for each one, sir. Each one regarding what, Rupa? Maybe you are talking about IBC?
Mortgage, sir, I had asked this one.
Mortgage, you might have learned it in legal, no? In JIB. There is no need of that examples now. You are a credit professional now. That
Okay,
is
sir.
basic. Yeah. Debenture Sarkar in equitable mortgage handover of title deed should happen. The basic activity is happening is handing over of the title deed by the debtor to the creditor. And the intention in the borrower's mind, that mortgager's mind should be that of for securing for an advance. Only for that purpose he is keeping, not for safe custody. So for that purpose, in order to make it evident in the document, we will obtain a simple letter in a piece of paper, that white paper. We will take a letter confirmation that on such and such date, he has handed over the document to the banker with an intention to take this or consider this as a collateral security for a particular advance. So this is
Sir, can you please explain a previous slide, sir?
Which slide?
The days one.
This appeal.
Yes, sir.
This slide. Huh?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
These are all the adjudicating authority as per IBC. I said they are the adjudicating authority. The DRT is the adjudicating authority for a partnership firm and as well as individual. But NCLT is the adjudicating authority for company and LLP. Suppose, as per IBC 2016, NCLT is ordering for a company to winding up of that company. Definitely the company will go for an appeal, is it not, against that verdict? So if the company is preferring an appeal, it has to be preferred with the NCLAT. That is the meaning of this. If a decision has been taken by DRT to wind up one partnership firm, if the partnership firm is willing to prefer an appeal, it has to file the appeal petition with the DRAT. If at all the findings of the NCLAT is also not satisfactory to the company regarding this winding up, then it can go to Supreme Court. So these are all the avenues available. It is only a appeal against the proceedings of the adjudicating authority.
NCLT means National Company Law Tribunal, sir.
Exactly. Now, next one is Basel Capital, Basel 3. Because Basel 1 and Basel 2 is no more now. Basel 3 is being effective with effect from 04/2019. So we will study Basel 3 for our examination. So what is Basel 3? Basel is a place in Switzerland. So Basel Committee on Banking Supervision is a committee which is functioning in Switzerland in a place known as Basel. So this consists of the governors of central banks of various countries, governors. This committee consists of the governors of central bank of various countries, just like our Reserve Bank of India governor. This aim is to improve banking sector's ability to absorb shocks. Absorb shocks. What type of shock? Shock will be from different risk. Maybe credit risk, sometimes operational risk, sometimes market risk. So in order to reduce this risk, maybe multiple risks may be there. In order to reduce this risk, these banks, that is the central bank of different countries, convened a meeting in Basel and they have decided to keep a minimum amount of capital for each bank to do banking business. That means the bank's main business is accepting deposit and lending money. So the risk will be there only in lending money. In deposit, there is no risk because already the funds are with the bank. Only thing is the bank has to make the payment whenever it is demanded by the customer. So the risk is only in the case of loans. The risk is only in the case of loans. So in order to mitigate the risk, this committee has decided to keep a minimum capital of 11.5% in the liability side of the balance sheet. That means if the asset side of the balance sheet consists of 100 crores worth of assets, the liability side of the balance sheet of the same bank should have 11.5%, that is 11.50 crores as the capital. So 100 crore assets. Assets means it includes CC, OD, bills, loans, investments. What are all the assets the bank is having, which will have a risk? Investment is also carrying a risk. A loan is also carrying a risk, because at the time of realization, there is a chance of risk. Because the risk is to be covered, Reserve Bank said that, or the Basel Committee instructed the banks that this 11.5% capital is required only for risk-weighted assets. Wherever some assets are there, and if at all that asset is having some risk, then only you have to earmark this much percentage towards Basel capital. That means if the bank is very much sure that there is no risk in a particular asset, then you need not go for 11.5. There is no need of 11.5% for that asset. That means now I am correcting it. I said it was assets, total assets. Now it is not asset. As per Basel, it is risk-weighted asset. One example I can tell you. Banks are granting loan against fixed deposits. So the underlying security is fixed deposit with the same bank. What is the rate of risk? Percentage of risk? You can say that it is 0%.
0%.
0%. You can very well say that it is 0%. So for that amount, for that particular outstanding, maybe a bank may have 250 crores or 5,500 crores worth of advances in the balance sheet as on 31st March. So for that entire 500 crores, you need not earmark 11.5%. Like that, Reserve Bank of India has given a circular instruction, extensive circular. It runs to pages, more than 350 pages. So it has given in detail how much will be the risk associated with a particular asset. It will be defining so many parameters. For your examination point of view, for the credit management, you just understand that this capital is based on the risk-weighted assets. Wherever there is no risk for a asset, for particular asset, there is no need of Basel capital. So this is actually the Basel capital. Now we will see how this will be earmarked, any percentage on there, that we will see. There are three pillars, basic pillars, which was there from Basel 2. Basel 1, it was not there, these pillars. Basel 2, from Basel 2, this was introduced. Still, it is continuing in the bank. Minimum capital requirement. I said there should be a minimum capital requirement of 9%. Earlier, I told 11.5%. Is it not? So 9% was there in Basel 2. Now it has been increased to 11.5%. Supervisory review of capital adequacy. A supervisor should be there, whether the banks are following this instruction, whether they are keeping sufficient capital. So now Reserve Bank of India is the supervisor. Earlier also Reserve Bank was the supervisor. How Reserve Bank is supervising? Through a group of officers from the same institution will be taken as a committee, risk management committee. Those committee will be giving this their feedback to the top management. Top management in turn will give the feedback to Reserve Bank of India. So this is the setup. So their main duty is on an ongoing basis. The risk has to be assessed and it has to be informed to the regulator, Reserve Bank of India. So the ultimate supervisor is Reserve Bank of India. Then comes market discipline. The Basel capital, how much percentage the bank is maintaining Basel capital should be disclosed in the public forum. It should be disclosed in the domain. It should be disclosed in the website of the bank. It should be disclosed to the shareholders. It should be to the public. It should be to the borrowers. It should be to the shareholders, and it should be to towards the employees even. You and me are eligible to know about the Basel capital of our bank. For that matter, we have the right to know about the Basel capital of Canara Bank also. So each and every bank is now should follow a market discipline, which is a transparent one. It should be known to everybody, outsiders. And what is the capital then? This capital is nothing but a risk-weighted capital, CRAR. capital to risk weighted assets ratio. How we will calculate this? We will calculate this like eligible total capital divided by risk weighted assets. That means for every 100 risk weight asset, there should be 11.5% capital. This is what is known as CAR or CRAR. Both are same. CAR capital adequacy ratio, CRAR capital to risk weighted assets ratio. So this is to cover credit risk, operational risk, and market risk. You might have studied it in detail in risk management. It's a topic for you for CIB. So I'm not going into detail with that. Credit risk is unwillingness or inability of the customer to meet his commitment. He has committed to remit 60 monthly installments in the case of a car loan. Now he is defaulting. So the credit risk emanates. Operational risk from the banking operation, some fraud is happening, or UPS is not functioning. Branch is now not working because the core banking setup is not working. The telephone line is not proper in that particular branch, and some natural calamities, floods. So these are all the operational risk. It emanates from the banking operations. Then comes market risk, results in the adverse market movement in the case of interest rates or exchange rate, etc. Where the banker or you and me cannot have any role at all. We cannot even control this because these are all controlled by markets. But we have to be ready to face these consequences. For that only we are in need of capital. So now eligible capital, I said, eligible capital divided by risk weighted asset. I said earlier in the slide, that is whatever is the eligible capital, if you divide it with the risk weighted asset, you will get CAR, capital adequacy ratio, or CRAR, risk weighted capital adequacy ratio. So what is eligible capital? Eligible capital is divided into two parts. First one is tier 1 capital, which includes a common equity tier of 5.5%. This is a common equity tier, and the additional tier of 1.50%. That means almost 7% is tier 1 capital. Then comes tier 2 capital, it is maximum 2%. Not maximum, everything is minimum 2%. But this should not exceed more than 2% at any point of time, because this is a going concern capital. This capital will be used only when the bank is become bankrupt. That means it is unable to give back the deposits, deposit money invested by the investors, depositors back. That is known as bankruptcy. We have seen insolvency and bankruptcy. When the person is unable to settle the dues, then he may be treated as insolvent. And if a court is declaring him an insolvent, then he may be declared a bankrupt. We have seen that. So now the bank is in that position. Bank is unable to settle the claim from its depositors. Then only this tier 2 capital will be in use. Otherwise, this is the strong capital which every bank should have. So this is 7%, another one is 2%. Then what is the difference? 2.5%, that is capital conservation buffer. So now in your examination point of view, you will learn like this. Sometimes question will come like this. What is the minimum common equity tier 1 required for a bank? Then answer will be 5.5. What is the additional tier 1 capital required for a bank in India? Minimum 1.5%. If it is more than that, well and good. Happy with that, we will be happy. What is the minimum tier 2 capital? That should be 2%. But there is some combination between these two. Okay, that you will study it in a while. You will be studying the risk management. You might have studied already. I don't know whether it is covered. So now this is 5.5% equity, common equity tier 1, and additional tier 1 is 1.5%. So the total is 7%. Tier 2 is 2%. So the total is now 9. Along with that, in Basel 3, it was not there in Basel 2. Basel 3, Reserve Bank of India has added 2.5% extra towards capital conservation buffer, which is also in the quality of this T1, common equity tier. That very good quality of capital. That component should be at least minimum 2.5%, so that the total should have, the bank should have 11.5%. So these are all a very good capital. Tier 1 is very good capital, and tier 2 is Not that much good, but it can be used in emergency. So this is the structure. Now, when you talk about common equity tier, what are all the contents? Ordinary shares, general reserve, capital reserve, other disclosed reserve, revaluation reserve, share premium account in respect of these ordinary shares, share premium account only in respect of ordinary shares, and surplus in profit and loss account. Here you cannot see any provision, you cannot see any preference share capital. Those type of items are excluded. Here it is the ordinary share, the general reserve, statutory reserve. Every year 25% of the profit has to be earmarked to the general reserve as per section 17 of Banking Regulation Act. That reserve it is. Capital reserve, that means by way of selling of a capital item, you have made a profit. So that is capital reserve. Other disclosed reserve, for some specific purpose, bank might have taken some precaution. For that, they have earmarked some fund from the profit and loss account every year. That is disclosed reserve. Then revaluation reserve, if some fixed assets are revalued, the property value has been valued in the year 1980. After that, the bank is carrying on the same exercise in 2020. Definitely the value of a particular land and building in Chennai, that may be different now. It may be increased to multiples. So that is, this difference is actually a revaluation reserve, because now anyway, if the bank is going to sell that property, definitely it will get that amount back. So that difference is revaluation reserve. Like the share premium account. Suppose bank is working fine, in good results, it is doing better, or not better, best, then it can go for issue of shares. 100 rupee share may be issued in the market. Initial issue can be minimum 150 rupees. That is, this will go to the face value of the share, and the 50 rupees will go to the share premium account. That will be there available in the balance sheet. That can be treated as Tier 1 capital, and this is most important. Any surplus every year from the profit and loss account, known as retained profit, we have learned it. Retained profit. This retained profit is also Tier 1 capital. So now we will move to the Tier 1 additional capital. Tier 1 additional is perpetual non-cumulative preference shares. Only this type of cumulative preference, that is, this type of preference share only will come. Perpetual, it should be perpetual, continuous, non-cumulative. Whenever that the dividends are not accumulating in that particular type of share. Share premium account, if any, while issuing the shares, bank might have received some share premium, just like we have seen in the equity share capital. Here that premium is also can be accounted for. Then any perpetual debt capital instruments, it should be perpetual. You see, these words are used for additional. It should be perpetual, continuous. There is continuity in that. It will not be stopped. It will not be matured immediately. So Tier 2 is all provisions. General provisions will come. Here the provision for bad debt will not come. Here the provision for NPA will not come. Otherwise, some provisions we are making, that is in standard assets and other assets. Is it not? Some general provisions. Those type of provisions will come here. Preference share, other than perpetual non-cumulative preference share, which we have seen in Tier 1 additional capital. Other than that, what are all the preference shares, whatever may be the category, that will be placed in Tier 2 capital. And debt instruments simultaneously, perpetual debt instrument we have seen initially. So here, other than that perpetual instruments, all other debt instruments, debentures, bonds, etc., will be coming under Tier 2 capital. So this is the combination of the contents. And now I will move to the chat box. George,
Sir, can you please explain about that formula, sir? CRAR formula.
1 minute, Udayan, 1 minute, I will come back. I will come back to that. Joe George Dominic is asking, time for appeal to Supreme Court after NCLT is 45 days. Correct, 45 days. Because in the first stage from NCLT to NCLAT, it is only 30 days. But sometimes 15 days can also be granted. But from NCLAT to Supreme Court, only 45 days are available. And Nibanjan Sarkar is asking 9 plus 2.5 CCB. Exactly. 9 is the minimum capital, required capital. plus 2.5% CCB. That is the total capital. Minimum capital and total capital, two concepts are there. Minimum capital should be 9 and the total capital, required capital should be 2.5%. And Nibejan Sarkar again asking 9% is tier 1 equity 5.5 plus additional 1. No, 9% is actually tier 1 7 plus tier 2 2. Tier 1 7 if you bifurcate 5.5 common equity tier and 1.5 additional tier 1 capital. Jaya Krishna is asking, will sir be Basel 3 questions come in ABM? Definitely, only Basel 3 will be the, because now Basel 3 you have to follow. Normally it will be asked. Karthik, is it revaluation reserve is a tier 2 capital? Revaluation reserve, earlier it was in tier 2 capital. Now it has moved to the tier 1 capital. That is some discounting factor is there, 55% discounted value only. We will be taking that. It was earlier in tier 2. Now it is shifted to tier 1. Subhai is asking, sir, additional tier 1 please. Additional tier 1 is nothing but preference share capital which are of perpetual nature, or debt capital which are of perpetual nature. That is continuously it is available. There is no maturity. It is continuously it is available in the business. Perpetual it is. If that is the case, if that is the nature of preference share, that is other than equity share capital, those things can be listed in additional tier 1. Muthulashmi is asking, kindly once again explain actionable claim. Actionable claim is a claim which is receivable to a customer, our customer. Suppose he is a debtor, he is now eligible to get the money from that particular party. Suppose I will cite one example with a beautiful example. See here, our trader's name is Mr. X. Okay, this is our trader. Trader means our borrower, is it not? We are the bankers. Bank of Baroda is the bankers. So Bank of Baroda is the BOB is the banker. X is the trader, that is a borrower. Now this borrower is in need of funds. Normally, what he will do, he will approach Bank of Baroda and avail some loan, is it not? Now what X is doing, Mr. A has availed some credit facility from X because X sold goods to A on credit. Simultaneously, A has given a bill of exchange to X after 60 days. It has been to be paid off payable after 60 days. So now X is having the bill of exchange of A. A has accepted it. Now that is a claim for X, is it not? That bill of exchange amount is a claim for X from A. That claim can be assigned to Bank of Baroda and X can ask for finance. So that claim will be assigned to Bank of Baroda. That claim is known as actionable claim. Actionable means through a court of law, it can be remedy can be sought. That is the peculiarity of this actionable claim, which is described in Transfer of Property Act. Okay. Now, Ravi is asking revaluation reserve if 100 in tier 1, what amount should we take? Only 45, because discounted rate of 55 is the circular says that discounted rate of 55. That means only 45 you can take. Minimum capital requirement risk weighted assets, that is CAR. Minimum capital requirement is actually that 9%, 7% plus 2%. Including CCB is the total capital requirement, that is known as total capital requirement as per total minimum capital requirement as per Basel II. Everything is minimum only, no? If it is
Sir,
going,
please tell me components of CCB, sir. Components of CCB.
CCBs?
What are included in components of CCB, sir? Like that.
Components is tier 1, that common equity, same nature of securities, same nature, common equity tier 1.
Same like as tier 1, sir?
Same type of security, that capital. That is 5.5 you have learned, no? Same type of. It's like it is included in common equity only. Sushma is asking on balance sheet and off balance sheet. Balance sheet is actually only financial items are included. That is fund-based limits are included in balance sheet. Example CC, term loan, and OD, bill purchase, etc. But if it is a non-fund-based business, suppose it is a bank guarantee or LC, where the liability of the bank is not fixed at the time of preparing the balance sheet. The liability may or may not originate on a later date. So at the time of preparing the balance sheet, there is no liability, because in a bank guarantee, bank is supposed to make the payment only if the debtor fails to make the make the payment to the creditor. So now that is not any at the time of preparing the balance sheet, the liability is not established or fixed. So that is why it is known as off balance sheet item. That means the bank guarantees and LCs are given outside the balance sheet in the notes to accounts normally. That is why it is known as off balance sheet item. Sometimes some banks are doing on the either side, assets and liabilities side, some contra entries will be marked in order to avoid omissions. So that is also treated as a balance sheet, off balance sheet item. But for your academic interest, off means outside the balance sheet. On means inside the balance sheet. So only fund based inside the balance sheet, non-fund based outside the balance sheet. Okay, then Muthu Lakshmi is asking something. Muthu Lakshmi is okay. Muthu Lakshmi, she conveyed thanks. Ravi is asking provision of subordinate debt 1.25% calculation, please. That is actually when you are providing for some expenditure, you cannot take the 100% provision for your provision as your capital. Why? Because the provision is for some contingency, is it not? Suppose that contingency is happening, you have to earmark that amount, you have to utilize that amount. That is why in Basel 2, whatever may be your provision, only 1.25% of the risk weighted asset, only to that maximum amount will be earmarked from the provision in Tier 2 capital. So it will be a part of Tier 2 capital. And in the Tier 2 capital, suppose a bank is having a provision of 100 crores and the risk weighted assets are 500 crores. Now you tell me how much you can account in. Bank is having a risk weighted asset of 500 crores and the bank is simultaneously having a provision of total provision of 200 or 250 crores. How much it can take? So you have to work out what is the total risk weighted asset, that is 500 into 1.25%. That is only 6.25 crore can be earmarked towards provision in Tier 2 capital. That means entire 250 crores or 100 crores cannot be earmarked. Whatever is available cannot be earmarked, only to the extent of 1.25% of the risk weighted assets can be taken into account.
Okay, sir.
Lakshmi is asking what is gone concern and what is going concern. Going concern means I am taking some amount for contingency from the Tier 1 capital, but immediately, if at all there is no change in the functioning of the bank, then it is going concern concept. In other way, I have to take on contingency. That's why I'm maintaining capital. So the contingency have come. I am utilizing some amount, but because of that utilization, my functioning is not stopping. I am still continuing my functions regular in a very good manner, phased manner. But in turn, I have used something from there. I have to recoup it back. But the concern is going, it is not stopping. But in the gone concern concept, what is that? Gone concern means if I am taking something from the cash box, after that cash box, nothing is there. I cannot even spend a pie after that. Suppose some contingency, some expense is coming. So that if that is the position, that is if I am compelled to use the Tier 2, which will be available only at the time of winding up. If I am compelled to do that, what is the meaning of that? I am using only because there is nothing is available in Tier 1. That is why I am using Tier 2. So Tier 2 is a gone concern concept. After using that Tier 2, sometimes bank may not survive. That is a concept. Okay.